Good morning, everybody. This is Laura Peterson, your host of Central Florida Real Estate Radio. I'm from Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty, and to discuss the sale of your home, you can call or text 407-566-2555. That's 407-566-2555. So I've got a lot of great stuff to talk about today, as always, and wanted to get right to it, starting, of course, with the stats. And I'm always open to feedback. So if that's not something that you guys want to know, then let me know. But I think that it always gives us kind of a measuring stick in regards to what's going on. And it's really interesting because, I talk to a lot of people and they're always like, the market's going to go down and, soon and all of that kind of stuff. And if it's going to go down, I'm totally open to being honest about it. That's not an issue. But when it's not going down, then I think it's really important for people to know that and to consider to look at really what is going on and everything in what's happening. So basically, when you look at the last week in regards to what happened, which was the end of the month from March 30th to April 5th, and this is now Lake, Orange, Osceola, Polk, and Seminole counties, that basically what we're looking at is that overall the median price increased from $365 to $375. But you know me, I like to look at all the individual stuff as well. So the single family homes went from $391,750 to $406. So it's a little bit lower than it was a few weeks ago when I was given the stats, because we've now included Polk County in this. And so that's kind of what's going on. Now, the total sales that happened last week were 1,049. And single family homes was 797. So again, with adding that additional county, we're looking at different statistics and a little bit more and everything like that. When you're looking at the condos and townhomes, that median price went from $295 to $312,750. So that's a pretty big increase in my opinion. And the number that sold of those was 189. So basically, when you're looking at everything and how it shakes down, then it's like you then have to look at the price points and the list to ask ratio and all of that kind of good stuff as well. So when we're looking at single family homes, the total that sold, like I said, was 797. Now under 250 were 61 of them, and there were 82 between 250 and 300. 242 between 300 and 400, 196 between 400 and 500, 198 between 500 and a million, and over a million, there were 58 of them. So, it comes down to, when you're talking about real estate, that you've got to look first at maybe your price point, but then you've got to look at your specific area and what's going in there. And the biggest thing that I think happens with both buyers and sellers is sellers are always saying my house is worth more, and buyers are always saying I think it's worth less. And basically, you've got to come to a meeting of the minds. And when there are a lot of choices out there in inventory right now in the single family homes, let's see if I can see that real quick, that the days on the market right now is sitting at 77 for single family homes. The list to ask price ratio is sitting at 97.27. And I'm looking for the inventory, and I'll have to figure that out. I don't see that that's on this specific report, so I'm going to have to do a little bit more research on that. But basically, when it comes down to it, when we're looking at the median price point, it kind of varies because we're only looking at a week's worth of supply. But in February, a month ago, we were at $395, then it went to $405, then it went to $385, then it went to $390, then it went to $389 or $391, and now we're at $405. So as you can see, that it's kind of all over the map, but we're ranging very similar in regards to what's going on. Now, when we compare it to a year ago, we're up about 3% overall, 3 to 5%, and that's what they're saying is going to happen for the rest of the year as well. So when we're looking at those condos, townhomes, and villas, that, like I said, that they actually, their median price went from 295 to 312. So that's quite a difference in regards to my mind. Just for a week, I've seen the single family homes when I started reporting this a couple of years ago. They were at 250, and that was after the big jump. And so now that they're at 300, they're going up. But the interesting thing about them is that there is quite a bit of inventory there for the condos and townhouses. I'm going to have to, like I said, figure that out for next week. But when it comes down to it, basically the bottom line is that there are more choices and everything out there. So as a homeowner, you have to stand out when it comes to that. And the first thing that you have to do is what I was starting to say, is that you have to get people into your property, because if your price is too high, you're not going to get people into your property. And that's why we don't like people to overprice them. And when, it's really interesting to me, I mean, when selling thousands of houses over my lifetime as a realtor and everything like that, when I'm looking at really what's going on out there in the market, and I'm seeing that basically when it comes to this kind of a market, that the sellers really have to be price conscious, and the market is going to tell us if we're not priced properly. So if we put a property on a market, our goal is 10 showings in 10 days and get that sold in that period of time. And in my opinion, that's what everybody should want to do, because if you do that, then it's kind of like you can have your life maybe disrupted for 10 days if you're living in your property. And that's what's going to happen, is so that you're going to be able to do what you need to do to make things happen. And, then everything's going to kind of go to, okay, we're moving and all of that kind of stuff, instead of dragging it out and having an average time on the market of 77 days. And, okay, are we going to show a house today? And we've got to keep it show ready and all of that kind of good stuff. That's a real hassle. And so in my opinion, do you want to do it quick and get it done, or do you want to drag it out and end up the same price or less later anyway? Because it shows that if we don't get people into that house right away and all of that kind of good stuff, that we're not going to get over asking price. And I was just reading an article, and it was saying that basically 22.4% of the homes in the U.S. last month sold above asking price. 22.4%. Now, everybody isn't in our same market where we're turning into a buyer's market and all of that kind of good stuff where there's more inventory, but the inventory is increasing everywhere across the U.S. So I think that that's something that we definitely need to pay attention to, look at, all of those kinds of things in order to make some things happen. So when we're looking at those condos and townhouses and how it shakes down, of those 188 that sold, I'm sorry, it was 374. I'm looking at leases. I'm all confused here. 188, is how many total condos that sold last week. And of those, 63 were under 250, 32 were between 250 and 300, 64 between 300 and 400, 28 between 400 and 500, 10 between 500 and a million, and one sold over $1 million. So the reason I say that too is, like, if you're out there and you're looking at the value of your property and you're thinking, okay, what, where am I going to end up? Like, how much competition and everything that I have. So, like, for example, if you're between 500 and a million, and there were 10 of them that sold last week, basically there's 230 of them on the market. So if you take 10 times 4, which is 40 for the month, and then you divide it into the 238, roughly 240 that are on the market, that means that we've got 8 months supply in that price range. So that makes it, pretty interesting that you've got to stand out above 8 other houses that are going to sell that month at least. And so it's really interesting that you really want to make sure that you've got your pricing correctly when it comes down to it and all of that kind of good stuff. So one more statistic that I wanted to talk about a little bit was the leases, and this is something new that I can talk about as well. But the median price of overall on leases is 2,100. For single family residences, right now it's at 2,300, and condos, townhouses, long-term leases is at 1,900 a month. So basically, when you're looking at that, if you're an investor, you might want to consider those kinds of things as well. But in order to get in touch with us, you can call or text 407-566-2555. You can find us online at centralfloridarealestateradio.com, and I'll see you after the break. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Laura Peterson, your host of Central Florida Real Estate Radio. I'm from Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty, and to discuss the sale of your home, you can call or text 407-566-2555. That's 407-566-2555. So one of the things that I'm looking at is basically staying ahead in the market. And as a buyer or seller, I think that you really need to look at what's going on in the market, which we talk about every week, and looking at the stats, and then seeing, like, what do you need to do to be competitive when it comes to a specific market if you're a buyer or seller. And it is different depending on what the market is. So like, for example, a few years ago when the market was extremely tight and we had less than months of inventory, I think we had less than a half a month of inventory. And so as a result of that, when a house came on the market, it was going like right away within hours. You would get offers within hours. Now, I was not one to take those offers because what we did is that most of those people had not even seen the home. So that was kind of a problem because they would think they would tie up the house and then they would go look at it and then they didn't like it. And so they'd back out. So that was not a good plan as an agent or as a seller to accept that particular offer. So what we did is kept it on the market for a few days. We actually got multiple offers, and then we went back to those people and got the best offer from the people and the offer that was going to work best for the sellers. And it wasn't always the best price. Because there are other factors that came into effect, whether they were willing to go above appraised price. For example, in that type of a market, you're not going to have the properties coming in at the contract price because the market was going up so quick that the appraisers couldn't keep up with it in regards to having historical data. So you had to have people that were willing to pay above appraised price to get the house, or they were paying cash or whatever. And I remember that there were some agents that I was talking to, and they're like, well, if it doesn't come in at the appraisal, then my people aren't going to buy it. And I said, okay, that's great. They're not going to get this house. And they didn't. And, that was just the way that it worked. But what we had is that we had the people that went under contract actually were the ones that closed on the house. And we didn't have deals falling apart, which unfortunately in our market, when you look at the statistics, there are a lot of houses that go under contract that do not close. And it is one of my pet peeves. And I am definitely in the reign and realm of everything that I want to change that we don't have that situation, and I don't want anyone else to have that situation either, because it's a lot of lives that are disrupted depending on when that property falls apart. If it falls apart in the first couple of days, everybody wonders, oh, what happened to it? It must have been something with the inspection or something like that. And then if it's at the last minute and everybody's already moved on or moved out of the house because they're ready to go and all of that kind of good stuff, it just causes a lot of chaos that doesn't need to happen. And the way to ensure against that is just to dot your I's, cross your T's, and then work out stuff that happens. And that's part of the fee of why we get paid what we get paid as real estate agents, because we're solving problems constantly in regards to finding out what is going on and everything out there with people. But there's a few things that you can do as a seller and a buyer to make sure that you're operating optimally within the market. And the first thing is for sellers is that you can make kitchen and bath improvements. Kitchen is the heart of many homes, and they might recommend that you make minor to moderate upgrades like resurfacing cabinets, upgrading countertops, and changing fixtures or hardware. And you should also look to the bathroom updates as smart investments that can improve your home value. Basically, there's the money rooms that add the most value to a home, because people look at those and they think those are the high ticket items that they can do, but you can be smart about doing little things to it and not having it really be a big deal. a number two thing that I think that is a good thing for sellers is to declutter the home. And first of all, you should clean out items that you no longer need. Decluttering can make a space feel bigger. For example, closets. If your closet is completely packed, I remember this one lady, and she loved clothes, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's absolutely awesome, and I do too. But so she had her full master closet full. Her husband had a little area. Then she had another coat rack inside her bedroom. Then she had another one in another place in the house because she had so many clothes. And, I said, is there any way that you could pack some of these things up? Because obviously in the next 60 days, she wasn't going to have enough time to wear all the clothes that she actually had there. And so she did, tell me that she was going to do that. She didn't end up doing it, but basically she had the idea that she wanted to do that, because when somebody comes in there and they think that you have extra clothes rack, they go, "Oh my gosh, there's not enough room for my stuff to fit in here." But if you walk into a closet that everything is very organized and they've got an inch between clothes, and yes, I have seen closets that are like that, you think, "Oh wow, there's all the room in the world, for me to do put all my clothes here." Now, I personally wouldn't think that I would have enough room. I would have enough discipline to put, all of my clothes like an inch apart and all of that kind of stuff. It would get messed up pretty quickly. But for those people that like that, and that do that, I mean, more pleasure to them, and everything that's just who they are and how it works. So no big deal. But basically that property that shows that they have all the room in the world to spread out their clothes obviously makes a big difference. And one of the things when you're looking at decluttering your home, if you take a picture of your home, you will actually be able to see, basically things that you normally don't see. For example, I had some friends, and they were, in college, and that I knew from church, and they were looking for a place to do like some kind of a shoot or something. And I'm like, well, my house isn't anything special, but if you want to use it, you're more than welcome to. And so, so they had me take a few pictures to see if it would work. And so I took a couple pictures, and I went, oh my goodness, I forgot that under this specific table, I put a couple of storage things and stuff like that, like a candle or something like that I was just kind of storing there. And I was like, okay, I have a lot of decluttering to do, because it's like when you look at that kind of stuff, you say, oh, there's a few things that are out of place here. And so if you just do that, take a picture with your camera, with your phone or whatever, and look at it, you're going to see things that you go, okay, I don't notice it there. I'm just kind of blind to it, and I might be able to move it. So that's a good way to declutter. Next, you might want to paint your home. It's a cost-effective renovation with a lot of oomph. Freshly painted rooms appear clean and updated. And so that's something to do. Improving the landscaping. If people don't want to go in the front of your house, or don't like the front of your house, they're not going to go in. And so you want to make sure that you do that. And then you want to expand usable space, which basically might be that you basically are using the room to its advantage and not overcrowding it. There is recently a property that I was looking at that they didn't ever have a dining room or have any need for it. It was a condo. And I told him, I said, in order to sell this, we really need to stage that we have an eating area. And so we did that. And it made the property look a lot bigger, rather than you don't have room to have a table, so they definitely did, and it made it possible. Now, when it comes to buyers, this is where we're going to get with you, is that you want to make sure that you get your finances ready. So basically, when that comes down to it, you might want to get pre-qualified for a loan or something like that, and make sure that you've got your down payment and all of that kind of good stuff. You want to look at the clock as both a buyer and seller, and know that today, on average, just this week, 77 days on the market, and most houses are. So people have a little bit of time in order to do that. And so you want to look at that. And then the other thing that you want to look at as a buyer or a seller is you want to look at the growth and the value, mostly for buyers, basically when it comes down to it. But basically, what it comes down to, it's more than an investment in a property. It's an investment in the town where the home is located and your future. And so, you might not want to go with just the lowest priced home out there. You want to look at what's going to work for you and your family, and that's what it's all about. So in order to get in touch with us, you can call or text 407-566-2555. You can find us online at centralfloridarealestateradio.com, and we'll see you after the break. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Laura Peterson, your host of Central Florida Real Estate Radio. I'm from Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty, and to discuss the sale of your home, you can call or text 407-566-2555. That's 407-566-2555. So a couple of other things that I found that were really interesting, and this was actually a press conference that happened on Monday, March 31st. So a couple of weeks ago, and it basically was with Ron DeSantis that he was proposing Florida's first property tax relief. So this is from that press conference. I thought it was interesting and what we wanted everybody to know. So they said that what he said is that the homesteaded Floridians need immediate relief from the impact of rising property taxes. And so he wants the legislature to direct upwards of $5 billion towards immediate property tax relief for Florida homeowners, which, if approved, would save about $1,000 for each homesteaded resident. And so basically, what they want to make sure is that Floridians can have the ability to stay in their homes. And of all the taxes that are impacting Floridians right now, property taxes are the most significant. And so we need to focus on our Florida residents. And so in Florida, we have the great luxury of being able to offload tax burdens to non-Floridians because people visit, they invest here, and they live here part-time who aren't residents. So this is only going to be for homesteaded people. So if you have investment properties, it will not affect that at all. It'll just affect the home that you live in that is homesteaded. And they expect to see, or they hope to see, a constitutional amendment that would provide more property tax relief on the November 2026 ballot. So it's a process, not an event, and everything. There isn't everything that you can do immediately, obviously, and all of that kind of good stuff. And I was talking to a buyer, on that, and he thought that was really good, and not sure that he was so excited when it was only for the residents and for the homesteaded people, but it makes sense. And, I was talking to one of my clients earlier this week, and she was telling me about somebody that had bought a home about 6 or 7 years ago. They had bought the home and it was homesteaded and everything, and the property taxes were $2,100. And then last year, what they did is that they added, through a quitclaim deed, their spouse to the property, and they added another person to the property. And it is still homesteaded from what I can see, and I don't know if they reapplied for it or what happened, but the taxes as a result of that change went from $2,000 to $6,000. And so I'm sure that, they weren't looking at that or expecting that to happen. So I just thought that it would be something for everybody to know, that basically when it comes down to it, if you're going to change something on your property, I would definitely research it and make sure that it makes sense for you, because that's the only thing that they changed, is they changed the ownership. It was in the husband's name, and he added the wife to it, and then also added another person to it. Not sure why they did that or anything like that, but they did increase their property taxes from $2,000 to $6,000 just by that act. And it wasn't anybody different living in the home, from what I can tell or what I've heard, but basically because they made that change in ownership, it did change things significantly. So I think that when it comes down to it, you definitely, a lot of people say, oh, I can just do this quitclaim deed and I can transfer everything over and it's not really going to be a big deal. And There are expenses that are involved in that. There are stamps on the deed that come into play that if you just do it for $100 and you say that's all the value is for it, well, the state can come in and say, hey, we know that your property is worth more than $700, and so we're going to go ahead and whatever it is, and they're going to increase the amount that you're going to have to pay on those stamps on the deed and all of that kind of good stuff. So basically, when it comes down to it, you want to make sure that you're getting the right information when you're going to change that. If you're not selling it and you're just adding somebody to the deed, you want to do your homework and make sure that you don't run into that problem, because that's not just a one-time fee. That's from this time forevermore, as long as they own the house, that'll be the situation. So you definitely want to look at it. So next thing that I'm going to talk about here is that there are some new ways of making homes. Now, I don't know 100% if they're in our area. I have seen some of them. Well, some of them are definitely in our area. But anyway, there's three innovative ways that can make homes, that can make them faster, that can make them maybe cheaper, and all of that kind of stuff too. And the first one is factory built housing that is put together in a week. And basically in this article, they're talking about some ones that are in Colorado, but we definitely have modular homes here in Florida, and it just takes between 5 to 7 days to build these homes. And once assembled at the plant, the townhouse style homes with that this is talking about, with white trim, balconies, and front porches, are about 90% done. And at their final destination, they're move-in ready within 6 weeks. So they can cut the time down quite a bit on that. So the faster you build, even at a high quality, means the lower the price. And roughly, there were 100,000 manufactured homes shipped in to states in 2024, up from 60,000 a decade earlier. Now, another new thing that's out there that is 3D printing is innovative, but is still a long game. And so I have seen this, and I know that this is on the East Coast. I know for sure this was a couple of years ago they were doing this, and so I haven't seen it here in Central Florida. But this is another innovative way that's coming along, is 3D printing, and it's still a long game. And what happens is that the 3D printer actually oozes out lines of concrete one on top of another. And so it forms kind of curved walls, unlike concrete blocks. It comes out in like a tube. And basically, it's farther off than manufactured or modular methods from making a dent in the housing crisis. And the technology is restricted to single-family structures unless traditional building methods are used as well. So it's just a one-story home, which a lot of people like here in Central Florida. But that's another thing that's happening. And then the third innovative thing that's happening here is a hemp and lime mixture called hempcrete that has a bright future. And this plant is related to marijuana, and it's being used more and more in the construction of walls. And it's hemp mixed with other materials, most importantly the mineral of lime, which gives it hempcrete, which is a natural insulation that's mold and fire resistant and can act as an outer wall, insulation, and inner wall. At the moment, it still requires wood studs to frame the walls, but it replaces the 3 wall building components with just one. And it's now they're helping, they're looking into research and making sure that it doesn't need wood studs. So that's another thing that they're evaluating. But as much as 1 million hemp plants to be used for hempcrete can grow on 1 acre in a matter of months, as opposed to trees which take years or decades to grow. So that's one positive of it. It is part of the cannabis family, but has far less of the THC in it. And in 2018, Congress legalized the production of certain types of hemp. And basically, and then the International Code Council, which develops international building codes used by all 50 states, adopted hempcrete as an insulation. And so confusion over the legality of growing hemp and the price tag of the machine required to process the plant called a decorticator are barriers to hemp becoming more widespread in housing construction, but it does have a bright future. So there's lots of good things happening out there in the world of housing and making it more affordable, but they're not necessarily today, but they're right around the corner. So in order to get in touch with us, you can call or text 407-566-2555. You can find us online at centralfloridarealestateradio.com, and we'll see you after the break. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Laura Peterson, your host of Central Florida Real Estate Radio. I'm from Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty, and to discuss the sale of your home, you can call or text 407-566-2555. That's 407-566-2555. So another thing that I wanted to talk about today are housing trends to watch. And we talked about the statistics earlier in the show. But basically, when you're always looking at what you want to look at is, first of all, the supply of homes for sale. And nationally, we're kind of right there going with everything that's going nationally right now, but many times we're not. And basically, nationally, year over year, the home supply of homes is up 27.5%, which is pretty close to where we are as well. The home prices nationally went up 3.8, which is pretty much right where we are as well. And then the days on the market were a little bit more than the national average, which is at 65 days. Or 66 days, which is up 8.2%, but we're at 77 days on the market. And so basically, the housing market has shifted over the past year. There's more homes for sale. Price growth has moderated, and homes are taking a little longer to sell. And all of those things are happening here in our area. But as I'm always talking about, it's very, very local. So if you want to know, it's like down to your subdivision, down to your type of housing in your zip code, in the school district, everything is a little bit different depending on, where you're at and all of that kind of stuff to find the comparables that we're going to be looking at. And I was working with some people this week that are looking to purchase a home, and they thought that the house was too good to be true, and they're moving from Colorado, and they definitely don't want to be in a flood zone. Well, this house is in a flood zone, and it's an AE, which isn't, necessarily terrible, but it is in an area along the coast that could definitely have those storm surges, and if it's anything over 9 feet, that this house is going to be flooded. So they're definitely not interested in that. If you've lived in Florida and you've gone through the hurricanes and you've lived closer to the coast and stuff like that, you might not be as afraid of that. But for somebody who's coming who doesn't know any of those things, that is a really hard pill to swallow and something that they don't want to deal with. So basically in order for a home to be out of the flood zone, it has to be at least a foot above what the 100-year flood range is. And FEMA is always changing them a little bit to look at what's going on. We don't have too many changes here in Central Florida. But basically, when you're coming down to it, you want to definitely make sure that you know what's going on with that, and if you're comfortable with it and everything like that. I know in that whole Clearwater Beach and down to St. Pete and everything, last year there was quite a bit of flooding that happened on those hurricanes that didn't hit specifically that area. The first one, I don't remember what the name of it was, but as it was coming up north and coming along the coast, it was flooding out that whole Clearwater area. And the second hurricane that came through was more of a hit to that area, but it didn't have the flooding that the first one did. So you just never know. You just have to be comfortable in regards to what you've got and where you're at. And I know I had sold a house over in the the curve right where the panhandle is starting, and that those people, I contacted them to see how they did, because that was very close to where the hurricane hit, and they had no flooding at all. So you never know in regards to what's going on. It depends on what side of the storm you're on and all of those kinds of things as well. So you want to make sure that when you're purchasing a home, if you are anywhere near the coast, that you know what's going on. I mean, we definitely, in my opinion, here in Central Florida, we're kind of blessed that we do have the hurricanes that come through every once in a while, but we aren't getting the direct hits. We're getting kind of the, after they've had a chance to go across the land a little bit, and they're not necessarily down to nothing, but they're not as bad as if we were on the coast. We're the place where people come to ride out the storm, as opposed to necessarily having to leave. So basically it's, we're going to be starting hurricane season here in the next few months. So when you're looking at buying a house, if you're uncomfortable, you need to make sure that you know all of the things that are going to make a difference for you. So there was a new study that came out that showed that home ownership on average costs 17 workdays per month to afford your home. In Florida, we are actually at 11, so we're better than that national average, which is great. There's only a few places that are less. I guess we're kind of in that mid-range and everything like that. A lot of the Midwest is in 6, 7, and 8. 6 is the least amount of days, which is in Ohio. And then there's a lot of states with 7 and 8 and 9, but they're all pretty much in the Midwest. When you're coming to the highest days, obviously Hawaii is highest at 17. And then California and Montana, surprisingly, are both at 15. And so you might wonder, well, how could that be that California and Montana are both that high? And New York is 14. And Massachusetts is 15. So those are kind of the higher states. But what they looked at is that they looked at the median price of the home, and then they looked at the wage data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics from January of 25 and February of 25 of the median home prices, is how they came up with these statistics in regards to how many days you had to work to pay for your home. So really, at the 11, I mean, that's not necessarily ideal, but at the same time, it's not terrible either. When you're looking at about a third of your income should go towards housing, basically that's kind of where we're at. So that's kind of a good thing. When you're looking at that, the whole Northeast, part like Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Jersey, New York, they're all on the high side, and all of that. And then, we're kind of tied with Tennessee and New Mexico are all at 11. And then, the West Coast, they're at 12 for Washington and Oregon, and Colorado and Wyoming and Arizona. And then Nevada's at 13, 14 is Idaho, Utah, and California. So it's all very interesting to me to see kind of what's going on out there and all of that kind of good stuff. But so when we're looking at housing, properties are increasing, which makes it more appealing, obviously, for sellers and everything. You don't want to lose money, but if you're thinking of moving just like a year or two down the road, purchasing a home might not be the best thing for you if you're looking for that appreciation. There are other benefits, but appreciation is a long-term goal, not a short-term goal. I had someone asking me recently, they're like, oh, how's the market today? And I'm like, real estate doesn't really have a market today. We have a market this month that we kind of look at, but it's such a slow moving prospect that it's not something like a stock that you're going to sell in 5 minutes. You could, but you're not going to get the full value out of it normally if you're trying to sell it so quickly in this particular market. So one last thing that I wanted to talk about today was open floor plans, and they enhance space and light but can lack privacy and require more cleaning, but they can boost home values up by 7.4% annually. So I just thought that was interesting that that in having that open concepts make small places feel bigger. and it might feel too large for some people. They facilitate the flow of natural light, but it's hard to get privacy. They allow more space to spread out when entertaining, and you might have to do more cleaning when you're hosting and that kind of stuff. And then they can improve the property value. The renovation experts note that the increase goes up to 7.4% a year. And sometimes some people are trying to shy away from open floor plans. I haven't seen too much of that. I do know that there are some people that want their own spaces, but they just want a bigger house, but they want that big area where everybody can gather. But we're out of time for this week, so I just wanted to say thanks for tuning in. If you want to get in touch with us, you can call or text 407-566-2555. You can find us online at centralfloridarealestateradio.com, and we will see you next week. Have a great one, everybody. Bye-bye.